The word iota has two distinct meanings. As a noun, 1. A tiny or scarcely detectable amount. 2. The ninth letter of the Greek alphabet.
Welcome to Iota for Friday, July 29th, 2016. I'm Tony Lynn. Where did my screen go? My apologies. There we go. Iota is a daily news podcast focused on the Internet of Things industry. And this is where we talk about all the cool stuff that IoT has to offer as far as we can tell. Now, somebody asked me briefly, well, where'd the name Iota come from? Realistically, it started out because I was going to do an Internet of Things podcast with an emphasis on Atlanta, which is where I live. But it just turned out that it means something small, which actually works out pretty good. Anyway, let's get on to the stories of the day. And I need my glasses for this. Pardon me. The Micro EJ operating system powers embedded wearable and IoT devices that run on ARM, reports Yahoo Finance. The system brings cross-ARM portability and provides a virtualization layer, making it possible to run applications written in Java without any modification specific to the device. Micro EJ is a French company that builds independent software for the smart digital world. So this is interesting. This is it's the same promise that Java brought to the software development world many, many years ago, where the idea was write once, deploy anywhere. And although Java didn't quite live up to it, it was pretty close. Very similar today with HTML5 and JavaScript. These are all sort of the same premises, is that you don't want to have to write code for every single device that comes along. So for example, right now, if you're going to build, say, a mobile device, then you usually have to code one for the desktop, one for the mobile device, and then whatever other systems you might have. Although the hybrid apps that exist allow you to actually write it once and then deploy it in many different ways, although you don't get the access to the native APIs as much as you would like. So now this gives the embedded software the ability to be coded once for whatever purpose, and then actually put onto an embedded device. I'm intrigued by this. This is a good start, although I do have some concerns, particularly around the fact that embedded software tends to be very, it tends to be smaller. One is because it's doing a lot less than, say, a larger application. And realistically, it doesn't necessarily have the ability to take the inputs and do greater things with them. Although there's a story later in the lineup that may challenge that yet some more. What do you think? Drop me a line and let's find out. Let's get a discussion going on this. David Thornton of the Federal News Radio reports that federal government faces 5 challenges to adopting IoT. While the Fed is interested and has begun to fund projects, we reported on one just recently, true adoption is cautious. David says they need 5 things, like I said, leadership, technical skills, funding, an update to the procurement system, and a higher risk threshold. Right now, most of the military projects, or most of the IoT projects, are military. Certainly you hear a lot about drones and the unassisted soldier, those kind of things that are coming in from the military block itself. There's still a lot of room for improvement with this. I won't go into my political thoughts on the federal government as a whole, but let's just suffice it to say that I do think that most of what we have is very bloated and very unusable. And I'm not surprised at any of this, that the fact that they're dragging their heels, particularly in situations such as healthcare or in education, is not surprising. I would. There's certainly no leadership there. That's correct. There's no technical skills. No one with true technical skills, are going to go to work for the federal government, particularly not right now when this is a hot commodity. They'll make more money in the private sector. It makes no sense. So really what the Fed needs to be focused on is how are they going to bring in companies to do this. And I think they actually are leading up to that with the procurement system. And that right now the procurement system is kind of, it's the $500 hammer sort of thing. I know those don't exist anymore, or maybe they do, who knows. It's something that there's a lot of room for improvement. Let's just say that. All right, moving on. Aware 360 expands its IoT footprint with Gemalto. Gemalto is considered to be the world leader in digital security and is enabling Aware 360, an industrial IoT solution provider, the ability to connect to any device and convert big data into smarter data. this article says that the secure data is the new currency and fuels IoT. Well, let's just start off by saying this is a press release. So obviously it's very one-sided toward whatever's going on. They're the leader in digital security. That's interesting. I've never heard of them before today. So again, these are European countries, and I think actually Gemalto is a Netherlands company, which is interesting. As I do a lot of research on IoT as a whole and just really sort of understanding the landscape that exists, the European bloc actually is probably quite a bit ahead of Atlanta, or not Atlanta, of the US. They are doing a lot along these lines, and so I don't find it surprising that, and we're starting to see a lot of these type of press releases here in the US. And I think if we're not careful, then the U.S. is actually kind of poised right now to take this and become the leaders of it, but we haven't quite done so yet. And so those are the challenges to each of us: is to let's increase this as well as we can, and let's take control. Pardon me, throat's a little dry this morning. At least the dog isn't in here digging in the floor like she was yesterday. All right, finally, Foghorn Systems, an IoT startup, has received $12 million in Series A funding from GE Ventures and March Capital, reports Sue Merrick of SDX Central. Foghorn effectively allows big data analytics to be utilized at the edge of the network and not to have to rely on the cloud. We can do it in real time as it's being captured, claims David King, the CEO of Foghorn. GE is banking heavily on this and looking to couple it with the capability of their Predix IoT platform. This here is very intriguing to me from the standpoint of the established ecosystem of an IoT device right now is the device collects the data, the device sends the data to the cloud stores the data, and then someone comes along and does something with it, whether it's an analytics platform, whether they turn around and consume it as a desktop app, a mobile app, whatever the case may be. So there's sort of this four-part piece of IoT, and what they're saying here is that, well, we can circumvent over half of that. So instead of sending everything to the cloud, we can actually have something close on the edge, and I don't really know what that means. Are they talking about something like, with the like the CDNs around the world, so that they actually sit at the edges before they actually go to the data centers? I think that may be what they're talking about. But to allow for at least some low-level analytics to get back to the devices themselves, and now allow the devices to be a little bit smarter. Very interesting idea, and that GE is banking heavily on it actually gives me a lot of hope. So again, more cool stuff for us to really think about. Now, I do have a pick of the day that something that I think maybe you might want to look into. It's not really for everyone, which is why I'm not going to discuss it too much. But there's an article out there on the narrowband spectrum in IoT. And if you want to find out in detail, and I do mean in detail, you might want to have a cup of coffee first, but it talks about how the spectrum side of IoT, how all this really works, and how narrowband is maybe part of the solution going forward. But check out the show notes for the link. It's at Link Labs, and you can find out all the information you want about narrowband that you would need to. Just briefly before I leave, I had a conversation yesterday with a gentleman here in Atlanta who's leading up the IoT, I guess, the endeavors around here. So right now we have a society here. It's called the Technology Association of Georgia, which is actually the largest such association in the U.S., maybe the world. I'm not really sure. And TAG is actually spending a lot of time and effort to really push the fact that Atlanta and Georgia is really the perfect mix of technology in order to drive some of these leadership positions. And this gentleman that I had a long conversation with, he believes that as well. And he actually made a statement that I thought was interesting. I thought I should pass on, is that Atlanta is the rare mix of university systems, of technology individuals, of Fortune 5,000, 500, 100 companies, has a greater group of this than any other place in the U.S. And basically we have the biggest powerhouse of technology, and yet we haven't quite we haven't realized our abilities yet. And so I think his challenge, and I will pass his challenge on to the rest of you, is that what can we do? What can we do in order to make this really take off? And IoT, I think, is a passion to all of us. Otherwise, you wouldn't be listening to me drone on about it every day. So here's your challenge. Let's figure out what we can do to now turn this around. And if not Atlanta, anywhere in the U.S., but let's figure out how we become leaders in this. All right, that's it for the day. As always, if you like what we're doing here, feel free to help support and pay the hosting costs, because they're going to get worse, at patreon.com/Tonamuck. My email address is tonamuck@gmail.com. You can always find me at Tonamuck on Twitter, and any of my other projects at www.tonamuck.com. Until then, until Monday, enjoy your weekend. We'll see you then.